Hello there. What is going on, everyone? We are back with another Star Wars Armada ship breakdown. Today, we are going to be taking a look at the MC-80 Liberty class. This is the winged Mon Calamari cruiser. This thing is absolutely beautiful and represents a very happy time for me because when I remember feeling really optimistic about Armada the day that this ship was announced and feeling kind of overjoyed at the upcoming wave that this was coming with. Very exciting time for the Armada community and a very beloved ship by many Star Wars fans. This one is kind of like the Rebel Star Destroyer in a lot of ways. It has that massive front arc, a lot of forward-facing firepower, lots of red dice, works in a lot of the same ways that an Imperial Star Destroyer works, but not quite as strong and not quite as the same as an Imperial Star Destroyer. It's definitely a ship that wants to do the navigation command quite a bit, but can perform in a lot of other roles. And so we're going to talk about that in today's video, hopefully give you guys a good idea of the two different variants of the MC-80L, as we call it, as well as the titles and a couple of sample builds. If you guys are new here to the channel, I invite you to stick around, hit the subscribe button, like the video, share the video. We're always doing giveaways. We've got one going right now for a lightsaber in the form of an Amazon gift card. All you have to do is be a subscriber and leave a comment on this or one of my videos. It's as simple as that. With all that being said, let's go ahead and get started. So the MC-80L comes in two different varieties, the Star Cruiser and the Battle Cruiser. The Star Cruiser is your cheaper option. The Battle Cruiser is your more expensive option. We'll talk about those in a little bit more detail, but the ship chassis itself has a lot in common between these two. It's still an 8-hull ship. It's a large ship. And that means a couple of things, you know, as far as cards that reference the size of ships. This one's going to be considered a large ship. It is definitely a very large ship. As a matter of fact, it's a ship that you see get destroyed by the Death Star blast first in Return of the Jedi. It is a large ship that happens to feature 2 brace tokens, which is exceptionally good at helping this thing stay alive long enough to deal lots of damage. And it does have 1 redirect. And while the redirect is always a good token, you still have a large ship that has only 3 tokens. And that's kind of one of the things that makes this more of an attack ship more than a flagship. Because of the fact that you know, it has 5 shields in the front, which is great for the forward-facing aspect. Again, you want this ship pointed at your opponents at all times. However, it only has 2 shields everywhere else. So that kind of Imperial Star Destroyer weakness that once they get outside of your front, that's when you're doomed. And that certainly is the case with many MC-80s. Now, it's still a large ship and still has a lot of hull to chew through. It still has an engineering value of 4, a command value of 3, and a squadron value of 2. And that's an interesting place for a ship like this. It's kind of like right in the middle. You don't often see large ships with a squadron value of 2. Now, it also does have a very peculiar movement chart in that it has no speed options where there's 2 clicks, but it does have a single click at speed 1, a single click at speed 2, and then nothing at the second notch. And then at speed 3, it's got 1 click, no clicks, and then another single click at the third notch. So it doesn't have a whole lot of turning capability, which is why I mentioned you often want to try to use navigation as your command with the MC-80 because of 2 main reasons. For one, you have to keep your front pointed at the enemy. It's almost a useless ship if you don't. But additionally, its base navigation is just so poor that it really, you know, it's almost like a crutch. It needs that navigation to really make it shine. Now, as far as you know, that navigation ability, I think it means that General Madine tends to pair very well with this ship, or people also like perhaps Leia, you know, or so anybody who can help with navigation. But for the Rebels, it's definitely going to be Madine. He tends to be the best commander to really make this ship shine, as well as any other abilities that can enhance navigation or yaw. There are a lot of upgrades that can facilitate that. This ship definitely needs those in order to continue to do its job. But when it does its job, it does a very good job. And again, it's got a lot of dice in the front. it's kind of like everything that's great about this ship is all in the front arc. And as we look at the actual ship profile, we can see that that front arc is massively huge. It's very easy to keep stuff in your front arc if you have the support. It's got average side arcs, and it's got a kind of a smaller rear arc, but the front arc is definitely the biggest arc on this ship, and that's where it wants you to be. Although if you're not doing the navigation command, opposing fleets can definitely get past that front arc. I want to talk about the MC-80 Star Cruiser first. This is our cheaper variety, and like both versions, this one is going to feature 2 turbo laser upgrades, an ion cannon upgrade, a support team, a weapons team, and an officer. Now, when we look at a ship like this, the weapons team is a really nice option for the big front arc, because the weapons team usually allows you to take something like gunnery teams and fire twice out of the front arc. Although in the case of the MC-80 Star Cruiser, we have 4 blue dice and only 3 red. So this is a ship that performs best at medium range as opposed to long range. Now, the fact that it can go speed 3 for a large ship is pretty good, because it means it's actually more able to get into medium range and stay at the optimal range if you are using nav commands like you want to do. But if you're coming in too fast, you don't want to overshoot your opponent and end up having them kind of zip out of your range, and then maybe you can't turn around fast enough to do it. So always be mindful about that. Maneuvering the MC-80 Liberty class is one of the more difficult aspects of flying them and doing well with them in your fleet. Now, this particular ship has only 1 anti-squadron die. It's got a black anti-squadron die. We have 2 red and a blue on the sides, and we have 2 blue in the rear. So no red dice out of the rear arc. So while this doesn't have a native salvo, it is potentially possible to give it a salvo, although I don't recommend it because its rear arc is not particularly strong for salvo, and you really don't have any of those defense tokens that you can afford to swap out if you were to do something like use your weapons team to gain a salvo there. Now, this was also the first Rebel ship to have two turbo laser upgrades, and so that gives it a lot of different options. When this expansion first came out, it came with some really cool things like spinal armament and some other upgrades that have really changed. So they used to be kind of a go-to build for a ship like this, but I think the fact that it has both ion cannons and turbo lasers is really good, because it's got lots of blue and red dice, both of them, so it gives you plenty of options on how you want to build this ship. But what I like about this Star Cruiser is that its point cost is pretty cheap, and that it's only 96 points. Being less than 100 points is a great way to get a fairly difficult to kill ship on the board, and you don't really have to upgrade it that much. For a blue die, a ship that's a little more blue dice intensive, I usually don't use all of the upgrade slots here, and a lot of times I won't use both turbo laser upgrades, because the idea of taking this one is it's a ship that needs to be a little closer to the action, so it may not live that long, so it's a good idea to keep it as cheap as you can. But also, I want to focus on maybe the ion cannon slot on a ship like this more so than the turbo laser slots usually. But we'll go over some builds. Next up is the MC-80 Battle Cruiser. This is the more expensive version at 103 points. We're also going to notice that it has a double anti-squadron battery. It's got 2 black dice for anti-squadron, so it's got a little more firepower against all those little fighters that might want to gang up on its side where it is the weakest, and it can hit them with a pretty good side arc shot. We have a slight change in our dice profiles here, in that we have 4 red in the front and only 3 blue, so kind of a little bit closer to Star Destroyer profiles. Not exactly the same, but it is a nice profile, especially if you consider the fact that it has 2 turbo laser upgrades. Of course, that will definitely increase it. If you put spinal armament and something like XI7 on here, and then maybe a gunnery team for the weapons, all of a sudden you've got yourself a really nice cannon, almost a glass cannon from a certain point of view. Although I wouldn't call it quite glass, it's at least plexiglass. So at least reinforced glass, because of the 5 shields in the front really give it that I'm going to hit you really hard, and good luck trying to hit me back, because I've got 5 shields and a double brace, and even a redirect if you get really lucky. And I think the double brace is one of the things that makes both versions of this ship very, very attractive, and kind of a pain for your opponents to try to break through. Now, this is a ship that at 103 points that you're going to probably spend a little bit more on the turbo laser upgrades. Granted, you can do both. This is a ship that maybe doesn't need to fly quite as fast and doesn't have to be quite so close to the action as the Star Cruiser. So now you can maybe afford to put a little more points on this version. If I was going to take one of these and it was going to be my flagship, this is probably the option I would choose because I'm able to keep this ship a little bit safer, a little bit farther away from the action. I also have a little bit more defense against squadrons that come in after me. And so this one is the one that is likely to live just a little bit more than our other version. Let's talk about some of the titles. So, because this is an MC ship, it can take the Mon Calamari Exodus fleet, although that is not one of its native titles. That, of course, that's one that originally came out with the MC-75 Profundity expansion. But you've got a 5-point title there that works on any Mon Calamari ship that has MC in the title. And, of course, that's going to let us, whenever we do engineering commands, to gain 2 additional engineering points. Now, that one's not maybe my favorite title for this ship because you know I like that ship better if it's supporting a flagship or if it is a flagship. And in the MC-80 Liberty style is just generally not doing engineering commands a whole lot, so it's not one of my favorite titles for this ship. Next up, we have the Liberty itself. Now, the Liberty is one of my least favorite titles in the game, also because of the fact that. I get that it's trying to be thematic, right? The Liberty was definitely like the home ship in some of the video games, and of course it was a very iconic ship. And of course it's the ship that this entire expansion was named after. And it's also a very cheap ship at only 3 points. It's the most affordable title that you can put on an MC-80 Liberty. And it's what it says is when you're doing a squadron command, if you spend a squadron token, you may activate 1 additional squadron. So what that does is it allows you, if you just do a normal squadron command, you dial, boom, the squadron value on the ship is only 2. So what that means is, it's not a very good carrier. And its ship isn't really built to be a carrier. Most of its upgrades tend to, just most of the role that it performs tends for it to be more of a gunship. So it's strange for me to want to really have a gunship be my carrier, but it's definitely an option. And because I think a lot of people won't expect that, I think that that's a pretty cool use for it. But the problem is to get the most out of the Liberty title, you have to also have a squadron token. And so it allows you to do 2 different, basically, uses, the way I see it. You can, if you have a fleet that's putting out lots of tokens, then you can always just use that 1 token to get 2 squadrons activated, and that's fine and good, but that's not really why you bring this ship. You bring this ship because it's a big, tanky, giant cannon that's shooting forward, and, oh, by the way, now I can also activate 2 squadrons instead of just 1 with a token. Or you try to have some additional token shenanigans going, where you're going to run a squadron command and a token to now activate 4 squadrons on a ship that has only a squadron value of 2. The only problem is there's already better carriers than the Liberty, so I feel like this is just one of those titles that I don't often take. Next up, you have the Endeavor, which I think is a very good title. It's just all around good, and it's a 4-point title. And at the start of the first round, you gain a Contain defense token. So this brings you up to 4 defense tokens, and I really like that. I think it's basically, on a ship that, if somebody gets past you, they're going to get to those shields pretty easily. You only have 1 redirect, so getting critical damage in is very likely. I think the Endeavor title is pretty solid. Then we have my most favorite title. It's gone through some changes. The Mon Calamari. It is a 6-point title, and this one has changed a little bit, but now it requires a concentrate fire. It says, while attacking a ship, the defender cannot spend more than 1 defense token during this attack. Now, the Mon Calamari title I think it's gotten a little bit better over the past year or 2. Since the Clone Wars have come out, we've seen a big uptick in the number of ships that are using the Salvo defense token. And also in the boost of Evade has really increased the viability of multiple defense tokens being used in any given attack. So I really like the fact that you run it with something like Mon Calamari. It used to be maybe a title that you didn't use as much because you might put something like something to generate accuracies automatically, or something like XI7, where you're like, oh, well, you're not going to redirect because you can't really redirect much anyway, so I don't really have to worry about that. You're going to brace, and that's it. But now all of a sudden, you know, with Mon Carin, if I'm doing concentrate fire, I don't have to worry about you evading and canceling 2 of my dice if you're a small ship, maybe, or maybe bracing and then salvoing also, and all these other things. So I only have to worry about 1. And I like that. I like that a lot. So I think Mon Carin is a very good token, but it does have the requirement of doing concentrate fire, and you're not always going to be doing concentrate fire. So it becomes a very interesting. Now, granted, I'll point out that you can trigger this with just a token. If you have token generation going on here, that's an important thing. I think overall Endeavor might be one of the best ones because it doesn't require anything specific. All of these titles that we've looked at, with the exception of Endeavor, require you to do a command that is not nav. And the MC-80 Liberty really wants you to nav. And so Endeavor works best with what I think it's trying to do as a whole. But since my favorite command is and always will be Concentrate Fire, I also really like the Mon Carin. Let's take a look at a couple of sample builds for the MC-80 Liberty style. First off, I'll start off with a Liberty build. Now, granted, I'm not going to run the Liberty on an MC-80 very much, but if you wanted to have a carrier that also had a wicked amount of teeth and could go straight into combat with the rest of its fighters, and you also want something maybe that's a little bit more thematic, because, hey, having fun and doing something thematic is always a great way to play Star Wars Armada, have a good time doing it. I recommend putting Ramus Antilles on here, and this is going to allow you to reveal a squadron command. You're going to get a free token. You don't need comms net or other stuff in your fleet. He's just going to let you do all of that natively, which is really cool. So Ramus is going to do that for you. Flight controllers is of course going to let you you know, boost up those squadrons. So hey, if you're going to be activating squadrons with this guy, let's make sure that it's even better. And so I like the flight controllers there. Fighter coordination team also is going to let you move your squadrons a little bit more, and I think that happens to work well with flight controllers. And of course, the Liberty title, giving you the extra token. So that's kind of cool. Now, granted, I do want to point out again, this having a token with like somebody like Ramus is like, oh, I can now activate 4 squadrons this way. But guess what? All those other carriers that have squadron value 3 can kind of already do that also without having to use the Liberty title. But those other squadrons don't have the same forward-facing firepower that this MC-80 Star Cruiser does. Now, I also left all of the other offensive capabilities empty here. Of course, you could certainly throw some, you know, some turbo lasers or ion cannon upgrades on this, but I saved those more for our other versions. So next off, we want to look at a ship that's also not doing the nav command, like our last one was doing squadron most of the time. Here's a ship that might want to do a little more engineering. So maybe it's a flagship, or maybe it's just a ship that's going to kind of lead the charge and expected to take a whole lot of firepower. And so we decided maybe a Mon Calamari Exodus fleet might work on a build like this if you wanted to. And of course, this would also require you have other MC-80s. So maybe you've got like a pair of MC-80s, or maybe you got a couple of MC-30s in there, or even an MC-75 kind of leading the charge, and this one right along next to it. This is, you know, going to require other MCs in the build, as is always the case with the Exodus fleet charge, because you have to exhaust the title on another ship, so you have to have at least 2 running that. But I decided we have engineering value of 4. Let's see what we can do for something that would maybe be a really nasty, heavy-hitting ship that would also be able to repair itself. And so we decided to go with Spinal Armament here. It makes that front firepower 5 red dice, which is super beautiful. It also gives us an extra red die in the rear, which, again, if people are allowed to get past your front arc and they try to circle around you, a lot of times people get behind you, think that they're safe, and all of a sudden you have to remind them, no, actually, I double arc you out of my side and rear, and by the way, my rear has got an extra die, and suddenly, you got more dice than you anticipated for it. So I always like Spinal Armament for that case. I also gave it XX9 turbo lasers. It's an upgrade a lot of people don't often use. It works for any color of crit, which is going to be nice. We have a lot of red and blue. We've got Katekin and Sholin on there to reroll all dice of any one color, or that can red crits can now all of a sudden do something crazy. And even if you got something like damage control experts or something like that, or the damage control officer, you can, this is not a standard crit, it's a slightly different crit. It also, I think X-Tech 9 works better on a ship, especially with like the front arc from a ship like this, that's going to roll so many dice, because what you don't want is for that crit to get through, but there's only one damage. So this is going to be like the first two are face up, so really, really cool. This also actually is a nice one if you're running Dodana. Again, you wouldn't need somebody like Maydeen on a ship like this, because you're probably going to be doing more engineering than nav, so Dodana could be a really good guide if you're running something like this as well. We've got point defense ion cannons. It's always nice for when you do lead that charge and you do get super close, it helps you be a little more defensible since you've got that Mon Calamari Exodus fleet. We also have put engineering team here for the support team. Now this is kind of fun because this means when you reveal that engineering command, you are going to have 4 points right away. So that's two shields recovered or transferring up to 4 shields. But if you got Mon Calamari Exodus token, Exodus fleet, and engineering team, now all of a sudden you're looking at 7 engineering points. And if you have Hondo, that's 2 more, right? So you can get up to 9 potential. Like you've got the potential for a really, really strong. I mean, Hondo's there to get you some extra tokens. Maybe you don't plan all engineering commands, but you still want to be able to use an engineering token. And that's something that Hondo can help you. Like ideally for something like this, I'm thinking first round engineer, bank the token. Maybe second round nav, and then third round, that's when you start doing engineering every turn for the rest of the game. Potentially, maybe you toss a nav or even a concentrate fire in there for like turn 5, possibly. But Hondo's in there to say like, you know what, this is the turn I have nav planned, but I need engineering also. So he can take that engineering token, make sure you get that, pop on Calamari Exodus fleet. So that's just a token. It just starts with 2. Exodus fleet gets you 2 more. Boom, boom. And then engineering team gets you 1 more. That gives you 5 engineering points for just a token. Very, very cool stuff. Straight up Jackie Daytona level engineering token shenanigans. So that's an idea if you wanted to do something that wasn't purely offensive and was a little more defensive. Although you have a pretty good mix of both. Let's look at a different MC-80 battlecruiser build. This one is designed to go a little on the slower side, but still wants to do a lot of shooting. And what I like about this one probably wants to do a little more concentrating fire because of gunnery team. Gunnery team is one of my favorite upgrades. We're really trying to take advantage of that front arc. This is how I often would run an MC-80 battlecruiser. And again, you're not going to concentrate fire the whole game. You're going to probably start out with a concentrate fire first round, take a token, so you can trigger gunnery team at will, and do a good blend of nav and concentrate fire with a build like this. You probably want to speed up and only to get into position, and then very quickly slow down. So probably speed 1 with something like this, because this is a playing it safe kind of build where it's still very much offensive. You might even do a little engineering early on with the auxiliary shields team here. So this ship's main weakness is that its sides are a little weak. And so auxiliary shields team is a great way to take advantage of the support team that you have on this ship and now bump those side shields up to 3. You can do that first turn with engineering if you want. Maybe you want to go turn 2 for concentrate fire and bank that token. It depends on how far apart you get deployed. And again, you don't have to take both of those. You could certainly swap things around and go Caitkin and Sholin if you don't plan on doing concentrate fire. I think that's another great option for a ship like this. It has a good blend of dice. But we've made up for that because we've got leading shots. Once, if you happen to get in medium range, you can have all the rerolls you want. But even if you're at long range, and this is the beauty, we've got quad battery turrets on this ship, which means long range, we're still going to be rolling red dice, but we're going to throw a single blue in there because if we're slowed down to speed 1, like I'd like to be, you're probably going to be going faster than us. And if not, well, that means we're not going to be under that much threat. And also it means you're not going to be able to, if you're going that slow, you're not going to get out of our front arc, and maybe we don't have to nav that much. That's what this kind of build wants to do. It says, look, I'm going to go slow, and you should go slow too. Otherwise, I get an extra blue die, which also means I can spend that die for all the rerolls that I want. And all the damage is going to do really good things to you because I have XI7. You can only redirect 1 out of that. And then, of course, if you speed up a little bit, then, you know, if you don't speed up, you're just going to stay in my front arc. If you do speed up, I get the extra die, and if you get too close, I've got Endeavor to kind of help mitigate some of that critical damage that might be coming in. And so that one's going to be kind of generally going a little bit on the slower side, so it can afford to do things like engineering early on for auxiliary shields team and a couple of concentrate fires throughout the game to split up that targeting, because the cool thing here is both quad battery turrets and XI7s can trigger off of both of those shots. So you can concentrate fire on the first target, also take another medium or long range shot on a second target, and really take advantage of that front arc. Gunnery team is very, very important on an MC-80, especially if you're using the battle cruiser. But it can also work on a star cruiser. You know, here's a ship that wants to go fast. Now, I keep saying the ship wants to do more nav, wants to go fast. Here's a ship that's going to do nav, wants to have a little bit of concentrate fire in there too. Again, this is a good blend of the two, but this is a ship that wants to go much faster. We don't have quad. We have quads on this one. It works either way. Now, my thought behind this one is the Moncaron title is great, so we don't have to have XI7s, is what I meant to say earlier. We don't have to have XI7s because you're only going to get to spend one defense token. And the beauty of that is I put SW7 ion batteries on this one. This is our blue dye heavy version of the ship. This is the MC-80 Star Cruiser with 4 blue in the front arc. Now all of a sudden, it doesn't matter if we get a bad roll and end up with 4 accuracies. I can just say, you know what, I've got Moncaron. If I've concentrated fire, which I very well may because I've got gunnery team there, I've got Moncaron. No problem. I'm going to make all those blue accuracies do a damage. This is also another really great thing about SW7 ion batteries is that when you're rolling blue dice, if somebody decides to spend some evades at maybe a medium range shot to make you re-roll dice, sometimes those re-rolls turn into accuracies, which are normally that's too late to spend more accuracies at that point. In this case, you can say, oh, it's an unspent accuracy. It's going to count as a damage. So it makes evades a little bit more dangerous for your opponent to use. Now, you are going to be navving at this point. Ideally, you want to speed up very, very quick because you have to kind of get into medium range to make this ship really do its thing. But once you get into medium range, it's time to start slowing down. This is a great build to run with someone like Maydeen, who is going to let those nav commands do a whole lot more for you. It's going to let you really get close. It lets you do sharper turns. And if you're navving quite a bit, once you're close enough, you may be able to get slowed down to the point where they are going faster than you. And then you can trigger quads as well, which work very well with SW7s because it's guaranteed damage. When you've got SW7s, a blue dice is always a damage, which is really, really cool, unless you want it not to be. We also put linked turbo laser towers on here to give us some of our red dice protection too. So SW7s make sure all the blues are always good. LTT gives you help with the limited red that you have as well, and also gives you a little bit of squadron protection. And gunnery team, in case you do go up against a fleet that's somewhat closer together. And again, even medium, you can still use it for long range attacks, but your medium range is where you really thrive. And the golden opportunity here is to get 2 enemy ships both at medium range. And with the type of dice you're throwing, don't sleep on SW7 ion cannons because they're really, really much nicer than a lot of people think they are. So I think this is a good way to do it. And that's going to do it for my breakdown for the MC-80 Liberty. Hopefully you guys found this helpful. Maybe it gave you some ideas you hadn't thought about before. There's certainly a lot of different options and different ways to run this ship, but I generally like to point it at the enemy. And as often as I say navigation is good, nothing is sweeter for me than having 2 targets, both within range, and hitting gunnery team with a concentrate fire and going boom boom and like eliminating 2 targets in 1 turn. That's the kind of the achievement unlocked thing that I like to do with this ship. All right, guys, that is going to do it for today's video. I want to thank you so much for hanging out, and be sure to check out more of the Star Wars Armada ship breakdowns, as well as all of the other video content we have. I will put some links over here in just a moment, but big thanks to my patrons as well. You guys are fantastic and help make this channel possible, so thank you for your continued support. I will talk to you later. May the Force be with you. Live long and prosper. Be excellent to each other. So say we all. Always wash your socks, and goodbye there.